Deputy Owen Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for coming in. And my apologies if I go over any territory that's already been discussed. We had a number of votes this morning. And if I do, please just tell me and I'll move on to something else, because I don't want to go over ground that's already been gone over. Just coming back to something that was said at the beginning when Deputy Nash was talking about the overpayments to teachers. And you were talking about the management of the payroll system and how difficult that is. You said that every 2 weeks, 10,000... What does that mean?
People coming on and off the payroll, because it goes back to the nature of the online claim system and how we basically have an IT system which schools all link into online, and if somebody substitutes, it can be for as little as one class at post-primary or a day at primary. If somebody substitutes for a day, they're entered in on that, and we can then make payments to them at the appropriate rate, and the appropriate rate will depend on a number of different issues.
So does that mean that every 2 weeks 10,000 teachers are sick for a period of time?
It means that there are different substitutions and arrangements arising. It's not. There's a whole range of different reasons that there are comers and goers on the system. Sick leave is one of them, but it's not the only one.
What percentage of the comers and goers though would be as a result of sick leave in terms of substitution?
I don't think we have that.
We don't have the breakdown of substitution with us today, but we can certainly bring the breakdown of substitution. Sure. Yeah.
In terms of the overall breakdown.
Yeah. We can give a breakdown of all the different categories of substitution. Yeah.
Has it ever been asked though?
Oh yes.
10,000 is.
Sorry, it's the nature of the system. We actually provided to this committee over the years quite a lot of breakdowns on the substitution. I can remember there was a CNAG report on the supervision and substitution scheme, and in fact the occasion of sick leave has been reduced significantly in teaching, and we're referring people on to the CMO, the Occupational Health Service now, much more speedily with a view to reducing sick leave time. So it's not just sick leave; it's the nature of the system in terms of the whole, especially of the second level system. There's a lot of part-time working involved in it, because schools have to be subject specific in terms of their provision of teaching.
But to say, if we look at the secondary level, and there's a requirement in a given week because a teacher isn't in, and say it's a geography teacher, more often than not, another teacher will come in and take that class, whether they're qualified to or not. They'll do it. They'll just sit in, and either the students will do what they want to do, or else they'll try and take them through the next chapter as best they can in their studies. In that arrangement, is substitution pay being paid?
It would depend what the arrangement was. We have a supervision and substitution scheme in place in schools. So if the substitution was happening under the supervision and substitution scheme, no, they're already paid under the supervision of their existing teachers. But if there's another arrangement, for example, if there's under another category of leave which it wasn't possible for the school to fill in, they would bring in, if possible, the teacher in the subject, but if not, somebody to supervise the class.
And with if we were to see, for example, say a change in that substitution arrangement, as of talks that are ongoing at the moment, or agreements that still have to be made, that's going to change then the system of how that's done.
It would be, if the proposal is as made at the moment is implemented, there will actually be a number of efficiencies for us as well as complexities. One of the efficiencies would be the supervision and substitution scheme. The 37-hour scheme would no longer be a separate scheme. Would be part of the general work of a teacher. And furthermore, some of the substitution categories would be reduced, so there would be a reduced amount and a reduced call on substitution, and therefore less claims for substitution cover.
It'll decomplicate your payroll system, I would think.
It would make that element of the payroll system less complicated. There are other elements of the payroll system which would be more complicated. The pay changes and the allowance changes may make it more complicated.
And then, in terms of the autonomy that a school has when it needs to substitute, say let's look at a primary school. If a teacher is sick in a given week or for a week, the budgeting for that, where is the primary school teacher paying for the sub to come in? Is that coming from a particular...
The school doesn't have a devolved budget for teacher pay. The teacher pay is paid centrally by the department, so if a teacher is going on certified sick leave for a number of weeks, well, typically you wouldn't be aware of it being a number of weeks initially, unless there are circumstances where you would. But often it would start off for a couple of days and then move on. So what a primary school is required by circular to keep lists of potential substitutes available to it, but sometimes they wouldn't be available. There are support services available from the Irish Primary Schools Primary Principals Network and so on, which they could use to try and encourage try and get somebody at short notice to come in. But if they realise it's going to be a longer term absence, they can have a bit more time, maybe after a couple of initial days, to put a longer time arrangement in place.
And in terms of, so the budget isn't involved, but the decision by the principal in a primary school as to taking on the substitute teacher, that rests with them in terms of...
They have to operate within the circular. So, for example, in the primary school, I think the first day of uncertified sick leave, that we don't provide substitute cover. It has to be for the second and subsequent days. I think that's right there. And
who provides the substitute cover for the first?
We have. There is no substitute cover. So therefore, the
class is just...
The class would be managed from within the teaching resources available to the school, so it would be perhaps distributed among the other classes in the
They
school.
have no budget themselves to say, let's call someone down the road who we know is on the list and get them up for the first day?
No.
No, okay.
No. Unless, if they had access to their own resources, they would be allowed to do that. One of the ideas about the online claim system was because of the complexities in the different teaching grades and increments and all those different things, and with the Part-Time Workers Act and the Fixed Term Workers Act, with all those complexities and requirements, we needed to centralise these arrangements, because it would have been far too big an administrative burden on schools, and would have been very hard for us to manage centrally and know where schools were in terms of where teachers were in terms of increment scales and entitlements and so on. So the online claim system allows all that to take place.
But coming down to the school, and so the second and third day, then they're allowed to bring in a substitute teacher, and the principal just makes a phone call to someone they know, or how does that work?
They have to, if they have to go through an appointment process where an appointment is for longer than 24 weeks. But otherwise, they just have to try and get a recognised teacher.
So we have, because I know that because the young teachers have come to me on this, that they'll just be hanging around in the morning and waiting for a phone call if and when it comes. And if it doesn't come by a certain time, they're not getting work that day. And if it does, then they're off. But it could be to one of the schools that they would have had to lobby in their area, I suppose, or close to them that I think they thought they could get to in time. That's essentially how the system, I mean, the free hand is very much given. I mean, I like schools having as much autonomy as possible, but the free hand is with the principal to pick the person. Yes. And what about then in terms of picking someone who had retired? They have a free hand to do that as well?
Yes, it's their decision to employ who they wish to employ. We have issued circulars encouraging schools to employ teachers who aren't retired. We have principals are required to report to their board of management where they've decided to employ a retired teacher. We have also put in place measures to reduce the starting pay of retired teachers to that of a new starting teacher, to discourage retired teachers seeking to return to the workplace. We've also been monitoring long-term substitution by retired teachers, and it has actually reduced significantly in the last 4 years. But we are seeking to put in place further measures. We are now seeking to put in place regular monitoring so that we can see where a school has really commenced an arrangement, and we're going to consult with the school management bodies and the teacher unions in relation to how, because it can be too late, it can be too after the fact at the moment. We might identify a number of weeks later that a retired teacher's been working somewhere for a number of months. We'd like to put in place a quicker mechanism so that we can sort of let schools know that we know, and let management bodies, so that will encourage them not to be employing retired teachers. Just to give an example, the number of primary teachers, the number of days worked by retired primary teachers in the 9-10 school year was 15,260. That has decreased, in the first term of the 9-10 school year. in the first term of the 9-10 school year, retired teachers worked 15,260 days in primary schools. That has declined in the first term of this year to 2,295. So there's been a significant decrease in primary schools of retired teachers working. I mean, I must admit, we would have some sympathy where there isn't a qualified teacher close by for the first couple of days of absence. What we have less sympathy for is somebody coming back, so a principal getting a teacher to come back for a prolonged absence.
You can see the natural bias, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's understandable. You've got a sick person out, you know the person is retired, they were good on the staff, they could handle the class, but do you track how many people then are coming back for longer periods of time then?
We are putting a tracking system in place. When we can see bias is nearly even too strong. Where the natural inclination can be towards that, but that natural inclination has significantly changed, I think, to be fair, from the figures.
You know, it's definitely a significant improvement.
The same, and we can't track it as exactly at post-primary because there's a days versus individual hours or class, but we know that there's been a decrease of over 50% in the same timetable, in the same time period at post-primary, but the decrease has been much more significant at primary. But the level of engagement at post-primary was always lower anyway.
Okay, thank you. Move on, and just the second thing I wanted to raise was in relation to an article I saw last week, I think it was, in the Examiner about County Cork VEC, because that's come up actually in the PAC before, and just the first line of that article in the Examiner was, I'm sure you've seen it from February the 21st, that the VEC secured more than 430,000 in unauthorised borrowing from Mallow Credit Union and signed up to a long lease with no permission. It gave conflicting accounts of the arrangements underpinning the deal and misled the department over the lease. What's happening with Cork County VEC?
In this case?
In terms of what the department's doing? Because I know that the issue's been before us before in terms of the VEC and I suppose irregularities there, but this is new information, I think.
There was an issue in relation to I think it was ICT expenditure previously, and a couple of other issues in relation to this. We actually met the VEC the week before last, and we're seeking clarification on a number of matters in regard to this, to the Mallow Youth Reach Centre and the lease arrangements.
And when did that meeting take place last week?
I think it was the 13th of February.
13th of February, and that was with whom?
I don't know who was there, but I know the CEO of the VEC was there, but I don't know who else would have been with her, and there were a number of officers of the department.
And is there a senior secretary or assistant secretary responsible for the VECs themselves who is responsible then for what happens in the individual VECs when these cases arise? The way the department is the responsibilities are split up. There is a lead assistant secretary in relation to the VEC generally, and there's another lead assistant secretary in relation to further education and training. And this Mallow issue would be a crossover issue between the two. And would you then have spoken with that person in your department about this VEC in Cork before this arose, or on a number of occasions? I mean,
I have had discussions with MAC members and other officers about this particular case, yes.
And in terms of the information that you're awaiting previously in relation to payments on 1,000 tutor hours that were not timetabled, estimated at €60,000, payment to teachers for non-teaching work, allowances paid to ineligible learners, additional travel allowances paid, and an issue in relation to someone hired to drive a bus who didn't have an appropriate background check. Has any of that clarification come back from the VEC since you went looking for it?
This relates to Macroom. Now, yes, a number of clarifications have come back. The major outstanding issue in relation to the Macroom case relates to the repayments of allowances to ineligible learners. We're seeking proposals from the VEC about how they'll seek to recoup that.
That's the only outstanding?
That's the major outstanding one, yeah.
And in terms of the VEC then, I mean, when you look at those instances then, and what was happening at the time, and you look at this now, what level of concern would you have in relation to the operation of this VEC?
Well, clearly there have been a number of governance challenges in relation to the VEC. which they are engaging with us to seek to address. We would be anxious that they assure us that they have revised and updated systems in place to ensure that these don't reoccur.
Systems failure.
Well, these are both of the issues in relation to Macroom and Mallow are issues that go back for a number of years. So yes, I do think there's a system. There was a breakdown within the VEC in terms of the reporting arrangements and so on. And
Do you think that they intentionally misled you on the lease arrangements in relation to the arrangement with Mallow and then the youth centre?
I don't know, Deputy, whether it was intentional or not. Obviously, we were given wrong information at some stages in this process, and we're seeking to get clarification.
But it's not the first time that you got wrong information. That's what I'm wondering if. I mean, I'm not trying to, but blaming a system, sometimes there can be a culture failure as well within an organisation, and we've seen that before actually quite a lot in Irish society, and it's a bit more difficult to detect. It's a lot more poisonous, and one wonders, does there come a point in time where the department has to say, we've got to step in here and send someone down, if you like, to the VEC to really find out what's going on?
I understand what you're saying, and that is always an option that the department has. We haven't come to that conclusion yet.
After how long, though, has there been, as the issues that arose previously, and it was brought to the attention of the PAC, and it was brought to the department's attention, we're talking about a period of over 12 months at this stage, aren't we? Since those first... Yes. We're talking about a period of a while, but we have to come to an understanding. I think, just as we were talking about with WIT, we have to come to an understanding of the outcome on the collective issues prior to considering any judgment that you've taken. That you're suggesting that we consider. Mm-hmm. And is there anything else then that you're aware of happening down in the VEC or at the VEC that might be coming? Have you received any other reports or allegations in relation to any other operation that comes under the VEC or its responsibilities?
There are a couple of other issues which we are seeking updates on. Yes.
Can you comment on them?
Well, there's a couple of personnel related issues which I prefer not to get into, and there's another issue in relation to the plans that they have in relation to a sailing boat and the maintenance of that.
In relation to, sorry, I missed that. A boat.
Yeah, that was given to them as a gift.
Okay.
And whether it should be refurbished or destroyed.
And have you given a deadline to the VEC to come back to you on this latest issue in relation to the 430,000 loan?
I don't think there was a loan. It was a loan facility as opposed to a loan.
Yeah.
Which is, and I think they would deny that there's a loan. Well, we have written to them subsequent to the meeting on the 13th, and we've asked them to come back as soon as possible in relation to the issues.
Okay. It would be helpful to get an update to the committee, if possible, Chair, as soon as we can, in relation to what's actually happening there, because we're starting to see, a pattern, I think, with this particular VEC and the way it operates, if you like. And it would be good to keep the pressure on from this side so that we can be clear as to what exactly the money's been spent on, or if there are irregularities there, how they've been addressed by the department, so that we can have confidence that the VEC has been chased up with in insufficient time, if you like, so that it doesn't become another legacy issue that we just can't deal with because the right people aren't there anymore. If that would be possible, thank you. And just another issue I wanted to touch upon, if I might, is in relation to private schools and the change in the pupil-teacher ratio that was implemented in the previous budget. Have you had contacts from any private schools seeking now to enter into the state system as a result of their own position having changed, given changes in the budgets in the last 2 years?
The description as private schools is probably unfair on many schools. Fee charging schools, 2 fee charging schools, 1 fee charging school has moved in, and 1 fee charging school has agreed to move into the free scheme. And as I think it's in the public domain that a number of other schools are in dialogue with us, but I couldn't say that any of them will certainly change or anything like that.
Which school has moved in and which is the one moving in?
Kilkenny College is moving in, and the school in Westmeath, what's it called? Wilson's Hospital.
And as the department on your side, have you, in terms of the contacts that you've had with other fee-paying schools, have you any idea of an estimation of the amount of other schools that might be coming into?
Oh no, we couldn't make a call like that, Deputy. It's a matter for them to decide, and certainly nobody else has made a decision to come into the free scheme.
But from a financial point of view, you must be anticipating, or at least drawing up some sort of plans for the cost that it's going to be to the state, should other schools, indeed these schools and other schools, decide to change their own position.
When a school decides to come in, it's not simply a matter of us agreeing. I think that there is a need for us to assure ourselves and assure on behalf of the state that there's a need for the school, particularly having regard to denominational issues. It just so happens that the two schools that have come in have been Protestant schools serving widely dispersed populations, so that the issue hasn't arisen, but it is an issue that would arise with the movement of any of it is an issue which does arise. I think we are conscious that the savings measures that we've introduced had the potential to be offset somewhat if some schools decided to come into the free scheme. That the offsetting wouldn't be arising in it to any extent yet. We also undertook an analysis of what schools effectively spend their fees on and the income available to schools, and the outcome of that analysis is to be published by the Minister in the near future.
Do you know how soon that'll be published?
I couldn't give a precise timescale, but it's
Do you
fairly
know
soon.
at what point, in terms of numbers of school or number of pupils coming in from the fee-paying schools, that any benefit in the savings of the budget is then offset by those pupils, if you like, returning into the system? Is it a
calculation could be done, but I haven't got that calculation to hand.
It'd be interesting to know that calculation. I mean, just from terms of your own planning and budgeting, that you would know, well, what's the actual threshold point at which this hasn't been a saving at all, and in fact it's now becoming a liability, this change in the pupil-teacher ratio. Is that work you're thinking of doing?
Well, you'll see when we publish the report that we actually do demonstrate. There's a lot of information about costs and that, so maybe when we see the report, we could have we can talk about it further or whatever.
Is that report that was going to come out?
It is, yeah.
This year? I mean.
Oh, in the next few weeks.
Next few weeks. Okay, thank you. And just if I could ask, when that changeover happens, I mean, what difference happens in the school itself, if you like, from a?
The biggest difference is that students no longer have to charge tuition or no longer charge tuition fees to attend. So therefore, the biggest difference is parents don't have to pay fees, and school and anybody who wishes to attend is able to attend, rather than it being limited to people who can pay the fees. Now, having said that, to be fair, in the Protestant fee charging sector, we have the block grant funding available for schools to assist people to attend. And furthermore, most fee charging schools do have some arrangements in place to subsidise entry, but effectively it opens up the entry. Schools then will be funded like every other school. In both of the two schools that have come into the free scheme, they also operate boarding. They're obviously free to charge for boarding, and boarding and fee charging are not necessarily the same. We have a number of boarding schools that are in the free scheme. So yes, I mean, there will be the teachers, the overall funding available to the school will reduce, because the funding available to the school with fees was higher. Combining the state funding plus the fees funding was higher, but schools are planning to manage within that.
But they'll get more teachers as well, though, as a result.
They'll get more teachers, but it's the cost. Yes, there's a 4-point differential, isn't that right now, in the allocation? So they'll get more teachers and they'll get capitation funding, but that would be offset by the loss in fees that they would have charged, and they'd have spent that on teachers and other services.
And then they'll still have their own admission criteria, as every school does, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So essentially,
which would be in the case of the Protestant fee charging schools would obviously prioritise the entrance of Protestants.
And so we'll take the financial burden then, essentially, of sending the child to school from the parent and put it back on the state.
No, not put it back on the state. That's a bit unfair, because the state already has a significant financial burden. The state is funding teachers into school, but there's a transfer. Yeah.
But it's great. It's a greater cost once you.
The state increases, the cost increases, but the state already is inputting significant cost into these schools.
Yeah, but is it almost twice? I mean, for a child who's funded, a child who attends a fee-paying school, the funding that the state has to give per child is half that of what I would give to a child attending a non-fee-paying school.
I don't think it's anything of that scale. No.
I'm trying to think of the figures, though, because the subvention that we give to fee-paying schools is in the order of 100 million.
Subvention we give teacher salaries 11, 12, 102 million, nearly 103 million.
Okay, but if we were to remove that in its entirety, for example, say, the burden coming back onto the state would be in the order of, in terms of teachers for the pupils, I thought was in the region of about 200 million.
I don't have those figures.
I don't have the figures for me. Sorry, I didn't bring them down.
We'll be publishing.
Again, this will be covered in the report.
Elements of this will be published in the report.
Okay.
Effectively, fee charging schools have a lot more resources available to them than non-fee charging schools.
Yeah, resources which have come, of course, from the parents deciding to choose to spend their additional income on that aspect of their
The state pays
family
less
life.
towards the school, but the additional money from the parents means that the schools have a lot more funding available. Not a lot, can depend on the school, and that'll come out in the end.
The state's covering the teaching costs, though.
Some of the teaching costs, yeah.
Some of the teaching costs, but not all of them. But it's essentially it's what the teacher and paying the teacher in the school.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said in the next few weeks we're going to see the report, and it'll cover all of those.
It'll cover a lot of this, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.